Secret number 5. Perform a non-physiologic examination every time. Many insurance companies and/or defense attorney cover letters, and even nowadays applicant attorney cover letters, are specifically requesting a discussion of findings of non-physiologic examination maneuvers. And sometimes it's requested exactly according to that type of language. In other words, many times the cover letter will say, please provide your findings on non-physiologic exam. Or it may say, please provide any non-physiologic exam findings. That's one way that non-physiologic exam findings are requested. In other cases, the cover letter might simply ask you whether or not the subjective complaints are consistent with the objective findings. And in that case, the request is the same. What the parties are asking for is findings of consistency. And consistency includes consistency with the history, consistency with the subjective complaints, consistency with the medical records, consistency with the physiologic or physical exam findings. In other words, is this case consistent with the mechanism of injury, and is the known condition plausible? That's basically the question that's being asked. And if you review your cover letters, you will find this asked in many different forms and many different ways. And in order to give you an example of this, I have here on my desk a cover letter. And in this case, this cover letter was sent to me by the applicant attorney, which is quite interesting, actually, that this would come from the applicant attorney. But let me show you or describe to you some of the references to the non-physiologic findings and for concerns of consistency. And remember, this is coming from the applicant attorney. So, like most cover letters, this begins with some discussion of the history of the case and the history of the claim, and then it gets into the specific issues that this particular applicant attorney wants to have addressed. And question number 2 says, are the subjective complaints supported by objective medical findings? Question mark. Please explain the rationale for your conclusions. So give the attorney what he's asking for. Indicate, in your opinion, whether or not the subjective complaints are supported by the objective medical findings, and explain the rationale why the subjective complaints are supported by the objective findings, or indicate that the subjective complaints are not supported by the objective medical findings, and also provide your rationale. And part of your rationale for both conclusions could be your findings on non-physiologic exam maneuvers, which we'll discuss more. The next question on this particular cover letter, question number 4, it says, are there any non-physiologic findings present on examination? Please explain the rationale for your conclusions. So here in this cover letter, the applicant attorney, which is surprising that you would find this question coming from the applicant attorney, but here he's specifically asking for any non-physiologic findings. So perform a non-physiologic exam every time and report your findings as such. And I have to admit that this is not something that I always did until I started becoming aware of the importance of non-physiologic exam findings. And a complete discussion of the non-physiologic exam and the significance of those findings is beyond the scope of this particular program, but do not discount the importance of non-physiologic exam findings, and expect on your exam to find non-physiologic exam findings. Many times injured workers who have been through various different types of treatment protocols and have seen different types of specialists and have been out of work and have been suffering in pain for extended periods of time, sometimes may exaggerate their symptoms, or they may elaborate on their symptoms, and they may describe non-physiologic exam findings. And sometimes that's simply an attempt on their part to indicate to the doctor that indeed there's a problem and that they're trying to get your attention. Many times these injured workers can't get any quality attention, and they're simply trying to get the doctor's attention and let the doctor know that there is indeed a problem and that they need help. So I sometimes consider non-physiologic exam findings to be normal, and it's not really an incriminating finding or a damning finding that refutes the injured worker's credibility. You will see non-physiologic exam findings. And so for a complete discussion of the significance of non-physiologic exam findings, I created a 3-hour program. Again, this program qualifies for 3 hours of QME continuing education credit. It's available on our website at www.easyqmece.com, and it goes into great discussion about how to conduct a non-physiologic exam and how to interpret the findings on exam with or how to establish the consistency of those findings with the history as it's described in the medical records and as the history is explained to you by the patient. So that's an excellent program, and reporting your findings on non-physiologic exam will substantially increase the persuasiveness and credibility of your report, much more so than failing to address non-physiologic exam findings as if they were not ever there. It's much better to address those up front than to be surprised by something later on.